This is my third little Dharmat for the day. I like dividing them out. And in this, I've combined a few people's things. I'm looking at Bhikkhu Bodhi's essay, one of his essays on access to insight. And I'm looking at someone whose work I like. It comes from something called the core teachings of the Buddha. And I've put some thoughts together, and I created a little chart, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And so what I wanted to mention is that the factors sort of being taught in that order that we've been doing it mostly, there's also a balancing of the factors. And just as much as the 5 faculties considered individually, each performed their own unique tasks in their respective areas that we've been noticing. And as a group, they accomplished the task together of establishing inner balance and inner harmony. And to accomplish this balancing act, the faculties are divided into 2 pairs in which each counters sort of the undesirable tendency that's sometimes inherent in the other one. So that way the pairs can reach their fullest potential. The faculty of faith and wisdom form one pair, aimed at balancing the capacity for devotion and confidence with comprehension and wisdom. And the other 2 of energy and concentration form the second pair, aimed at balancing the capacity for active exertion and effort with calm recollection or concentration. And so within the complementary pairs, in the middle stands mindfulness, because it protects the mind from extremes, and it holds the promise that each pair will hold one another in mutual containment and creates a kind of mutual enriching tension, so to speak. And while used and noticed in everyday functions of the mind, it's noticeable. And through the Dhamma, the 5 faculties acquire more of a transcendent quality, ability. And when they're developed regularly and cultivated, the Buddha says that it leads to what is called the deathless, total freedom. And one of the other kind of symbols of the 5 spiritual faculties is that it's said to be like a cart with 4 wheels and a driver. And if any of the 4 wheels is too small or wobbly or not in balance with the others, then the going on the spiritual road can be rough. The 4 wheels symbolize faith and wisdom and energy and concentration. And if the driver isn't paying enough attention, there's going to be problems. And the driver symbolizes mindfulness. That's in the Visuddhimagga and also in the Samyutta Nikaya 48, which is where the writings of the Buddha are translated over time, are about the 5 faculties. The trick is that faith and wisdom, they have to be strengthened and kept in balance, as also must energy and concentration. Mindfulness can always be increased, so it doesn't really have to be kept. It doesn't have a balance. It doesn't have an opposite. And while this list can sound sort of simple and obvious, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. And on the spiritual path, it's worth checking up on ourselves regularly to determine if the first four are strong and in balance, or if we can use a little bit more mindfulness. Let me see if I can show you my fine art of creating in Pages documents. Since I'm an Apple user, let's see if I can get this to come up. There it is. Now let's see if I can share it. I can. Okay, see my little drawing? The circles might not be level. So, faith and wisdom. If we start with faith and wisdom, as you see my little arrows, mindfulness is in the middle, faith and wisdom have the red arrows going out, and energy and concentration have the purple arrows going out. And if you're a person who likes to see things in lists, the list is down at the bottom with mindfulness in the middle. So lack of faith or lack of confidence can lead to a kind of cynicism. We might give up, or we might have half-hearted effort or bitterness. And excess faith can lead to a blind adherence, a kind of dogma, a sectarian kind of arrogance. Being disappointed or disillusioned when you realize that your teachers don't meet all your expectations, or there's an inability to realistically examine and revise your approach to spirituality when it's necessary. Insufficient wisdom can lead to blindness, a gullibility, narrow-mindedness of agenda, motivated interpretations of the teachings. Wisdom can be distorted by the intellect, and then it can lead to harmful or kind of cleverness or a vanity about our insights, and that can lead to a kind of spiritual bullying rather than a more mature, heartfelt wisdom. So lack of wisdom can lead to overemphasis on acquiring knowledge over practice and direct experience. Sort of a desperate attempt sometimes to think our way into enlightenment. And we can see that the excess of intellect is often a sign of a lack of faith. And an excess of faith is often marked by a lack of wisdom. So when faith and wisdom are in balance, there's a heartfelt steadiness, a quality of balanced and genuine inquiry, an ability to persevere. And with this actually comes a kind of unmistakable humility. Which is always noticeable when someone has balanced wisdom and faith, the humility that arises. Faith, at its best, produces deep gratitude for life and all its richness, for its lessons and difficulties and blessings, and for the chance to awaken. We have faith that training in morality in sila is a good idea, harmonious living, and that we can do it. It provides enthusiasm, and it can galvanize energy and serve as a support in times of trouble, and allows us to move forward without holding back. This confidence allows us to realize that some truly brilliant, dedicated, and wise people have come before us and left effective methods and maps that we can follow to achieve what they achieved. And wisdom at its best comes from deep and direct perceptual investigation of life as it is. right here, right now. It goes far beyond the reach of reason and rational thought. It can transcend the paradoxes that reason and rational thought inevitably create. And in the end, wisdom and faith converge, with mindfulness being present there in the middle. And how do we apply this teaching? Most of us suffer from imbalances of wisdom and faith with pretty much regularity. And so if something in your practice seems off, just checking in with the 5 spiritual faculties and asking ourselves, could I perhaps work on strengthening wisdom or faith, or bring them into balance? And this is a powerful question if we're willing to be honest with ourselves and engaged in it. It can correct a lot of difficulties on our spiritual path by balancing this faith and wisdom. And another good way to apply the teaching is to review the symptoms of imbalance and ask ourselves if any of them apply to us. It's an easy way to identify what might need some attention. If we start fixating on lists and maps, wisdoms become distorted and imbalanced, and we could work on having some faith. That simple teachings relating to this moment, applied again and again, will move things along. We can have faith in the practice as we clearly see, moment to moment, what is arising, as we've been doing all day long, clearly seeing moment to moment. And then there's the balance of energy and concentration. The same principles apply to energy and concentration. They both have to be strengthened, but also in balance. And with insufficient energy, there's sloth and torpor, dullness and tiredness. And when there's excess energy, the mind and body may be restless or agitated, jumpy, strained or tense and irritable. With excess energy, we may be completely unable to focus at all because we're overemphasizing effort at the expense of focusing on that object of meditation, the breath, or the touch point. And with insufficient concentration, the mind won't stay with its chosen meditation object, and it tends to get lost in thought or snagged by stories, as we've witnessed over and over again. But with excess concentration, we can become strained due to focusing too narrowly and tightly for reality to be able to breathe around us. And again, too much energy is related to a lack of concentration, and vice versa. Too much concentration is related to a lack of energy. With a lot of concentration, sometimes it seems like we're dull and sleepy, but it's not due to tiredness. It's an extreme concentration that can sometimes make us feel dull and sleepy. And it's really common for people to forget these straightforward guidelines and they forget to look back at a simple little list like this one for help. So when this balance is right, the posture is straight and steady but not rigid, and the mind is bright and focused steadily on the object that we've chosen. And their back and forth interplay with a kind of relaxedness around it. So it helps to pay attention to how your practice is going and adjust the levels of energy and concentration accordingly. Finding the balance, it takes time, and it may require regular readjustment as we learn to use the power of our minds. Sometimes it's helpful to be very gentle with our attention, as if we're trying to feel the wind on our skin from the flapping of a butterfly wing. And sometimes it's helpful to use our attention like a well-oiled, fast machine. And often we do just fine somewhere in between. But we need a willingness to tinker with these various combinations of energy and concentration. That willingness can produce the personal experience to figure out what helps and what's too much and what's too little. And that's why we spend this time on a day like today, having enough continuity to begin to balance and see what's too much, what's too little. And as the balance of energy and concentration matures, it might feel strangely that there's little energy or much concentration. Things sometimes may be perceived clearly with very little effort. And so the experience may seem quite spacious and inclusive rather than narrow and focused and concentrated. And this can surprise people. Sometimes there's clinging to a less mature phase of developing concentration. And that can sometimes feel narrow and tight. And the less mature phase of developing energy feels like a lot of effort. And so it can actually be very little effort required. And when energy and concentration mature, the feel is spacious and easy and natural and clear. It can be broad and rich. It can be very subtle. Everything just shows itself all the way through on its own without efforting. It just appears, it shows itself to the mind. And so as we apply effort to practice and build concentration, our mind grows stronger. And when cultivating an energetic and concentrated mind, we guard it well and direct it to skillful practices and ways of being, so that skillfulness can be written deeply into our mind, rather than those more unskillful mind states like rage and jealousy and terror and conceit. We don't want the mind to allow the mind to go down these unskillful tracks over and over again and channels for longer than it takes to actually recognize that it's doing that. And sometimes those harmful mental habits and tendencies will be written deeply in our mind with that same power. So that's why we try to direct our mind to skillful practices and, continue letting the mind deepen with those skillful practices. So I think I can unshare, and you don't have to keep staring at my graphic. When energy and concentration come online without mindfulness being strong enough, then the mind may be prone to getting caught in obsessive thinking, fueled by strong energy and concentration. So we want to watch for this and generally stay grounded in physical objects, like the feet in the walking practice or the breath, until some more skill is developed. And this is particularly common sometimes when you're on a retreat and you're a few days into the retreat. It takes a while. Energy and concentration can be there, but mindfulness needs to be strong enough. It's said that a cultivated mind is like a fire. The hotter the fire, the more it can accomplish useful ends, like cook food or melt iron for forging. However, the hotter the fire, the more it can get out of control and burn things down if it isn't properly tended or monitored. So when practicing, especially when we have a long day like this or on retreat, but also in daily life, we need to be careful and respectful of the power of energetic and concentrated mind. We need to use it skillfully, just as we would any powerful tool. We can imagine that a very strong mind is like an acetylene cutting torch, useful for cutting through things, in our case like delusion, yet capable of hurting ourselves and of others if it's not properly handled. Keep this analogy in mind and remember training in morality of right speech and right action, right livelihood, sila, harmonious living. And we're likely to do much better in our practice. I notice this one quite a bit when I think, I'm not being quite skillful enough in my speech. I have this, strong mind and it's concentrated, and I want to have something accomplished in my speech, and sometimes it's not so helpful for others to be that concentrated and energetic. There has to be a little more mindfulness toward how it's spoken, and if it's spoken kindly, and if it's necessary, and will it be received well? Nelson Mandela, I read this quote by Nelson Mandela, you might have heard it. For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. So mindfulness in that little diagram of the balancing factors is in the middle. It's in a category all by itself. It can potentially balance and perfect the remaining of all four of the spiritual qualities. And this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be informed by the other two pairs, but that mindfulness is extremely important. Mindfulness means knowing what is as it is right now. It's the quality of the mind that knows things as they are. Really, it's the quality of sensations manifesting as they are, where they are, and on their own. They're just arising. Mindfulness is there to be present. And sometimes it seems like mindfulness appears to be something that we create or we cultivate. And that's okay for the time being as we're getting used to mindfulness. If we're trying to perceive the sensation that makes up our existence clearly and to know what they are, we're balancing energy and concentration and faith and wisdom. And due to energy, the mind is alert and attentive. Due to concentration, it's stable. Faith here may also mean acceptance, and wisdom can be clear comprehension. And so we notice that it has nothing to do with a kind of vague spacing out in which we wish that the reality would go away and that our thoughts would never arise again. I know sometimes people have this idea that a kind of escapist aversion to the experience, and think that that's related to insight practice. But with insight practice, with mindfulness, we are with whatever arises. We're not escaping what might be aversive to us. And mindfulness means being very clear about our human experience as it is. It's about being here now. The truth is found in ordinary sensations that make up our experience. If we're not mindful of them, or we reject them because we're looking for progress in our practice or depth or transcendence, we won't be able to appreciate what they have to teach. And we might be unable to do the insight practices. We realize that we have to pay attention to our thoughts and our deeds. In order to do this, we try to be mindful of them. We realize that we often fail to pay attention, so we try to increase our ability to concentrate on how we live our life. And in this way, through experience, we become wiser in a relative sense, learning how to live a good and useful life. And seeing our skill improve, the benefits that it has for our lives, we generate more faith, more confidence. And so we begin to notice balance in our practice. In training in concentration, we might have faith that we might be able to attain higher states of consciousness. So we sit down on a cushion and energetically try to stabilize our attention and tune into skillful qualities. And we realize that we can't stabilize our attention without mindfulness of our object and the qualities of the states that we wish to attain. And so we develop strong concentration by consistently stabilizing our attention, and we attain deeper states of concentration, and we're able to gain a direct understanding of how to navigate in that territory and the meaning and the purpose for doing so. Our success creates more faith, and then we apply energy to further develop our concentration abilities. With faith, born of the experience yielded by strong concentration, we begin to think that it's possible to awaken. And so we energetically explore all the sensations that make up our world with an alert and an energetic mind. And we can mindfully explore this heart and mind and body just as it is now. Reality can become more interesting, so our concentration grows. And this combination of the first four fundamental faculties, wisdom then leads to more faith, and the cycle goes on around again, back to the ridgepole wisdom. And so the teachings of the faculties, it's been explored in great depth and length in many books, and there's really a lot of depth and nuance to it. In its simple form, you can easily apply it. And at critical times, it can really help. Balance and strengthen and balance. These are the cycles that we go through with these faculties. And there's no limit to the level that they can be mastered, the level at which they can be mastered. So it's aptly said that when balanced and perfected, the five spiritual faculties, as they apply to insight training, are a sufficient cause for awakening. When balanced and perfected, the five spiritual faculties, as they apply to insight training, are a sufficient cause for awakening. And those five faculties are pretty easy to remember, really. You take some repetition. And we can think of it as mindfulness in the middle and energy and concentration balancing each other, and faith and wisdom balancing each other. And we can go back to the simpleness of just being in the present moment with each breath, with whatever we're choosing as our object. And we will see wisdom arise, and mindfulness will be there balancing it. So let's let those words settle down and notice how these strength factors show themselves to us. I'll ring the bell for us to sit for a few minutes. And we might ask ourselves as we're reflecting, have you ever noticed in daily life when you may have had an energetic or concentrated mind, and when it's useful for cutting through delusion or confusion? Have you been able to notice harmonious living, sila, the morality practices, arise to be sure that that concentration and energy doesn't hurt oneself, yourself, or others? Where might we have noticed sometimes the balancing of the factors? Have we noticed that there's sometimes a lack of faith or confidence, and sometimes we might feel like giving up, or we might have half-hearted effort? Does wisdom come in to help balance? Or sometimes do we get overly intellectual, vain about our insights, or try to think our way to enlightenment, think our way to freedom? And so we balance faith and wisdom, energy and concentration, and mindfulness is always present. Noticing the breath, being present with what's arising. What's happening in the mind? Having equanimity, balance with the present moment. And staying with our continuity of practice, I'm going to ring the bell once. You can continue sitting, or you can get up and do walking or movement that feels comfortable to you. And we will come back and check in 10 minutes. And remember that the merit of our practice benefits all sentient beings. The goodness that arises in your practice, and through the act of sharing with each other and others, desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, as we remember these balancing factors, these strengths